Hello, everyone. My name is Avion Howard, and I'm a self-improvement content creator and mental health advocate with a bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm also a blog writer for Evolve that covers student health, student mental health, and productivity. You can find me and more of my work on my Instagram at deluxe_evolution. And I'll be the host of this new series I developed in collaboration with Evolve Mental Health, which is called A Day in the Life of a Grad, where we explore the lives of various students from all types of different backgrounds to dive deep into their perspectives as well as their experiences. For those who might not have heard of Evolve, this is a mental health platform that is helping students improve their mental health and student life by creating resources that supports their overall well-being. And today we have our first guest of the series, Jason Taylor. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jason, and have you on with us. You can feel free to introduce yourself, just a bit about your background, who you are, what you do, and we can get started.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Yeah, like you said, my name's Jason Taylor. I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying here in Ottawa, Ontario. Um, yeah, I recently graduated from Yorkville University last December timeframe, so I'm relatively new within the field, but I very much enjoy it.
That's good to hear. Congratulations on your recent graduation. I've actually just
Thanks.
recently graduated as well, just
Oh,
this
congrats.
May. Right. So I wanted to dive into that school experience. What was your school experience like? Any exciting moments that stood out to you the most?
It was really good. Well, in terms of like my master's, I enjoyed even more so than my undergrad. My undergrad was a lot of fun, but I found my master's was really focused on collaboration, which was something I felt like was missing in my undergraduate degree. And it was really kind of Yorkville had a very interesting dynamic that they played out where everything was like chat forums and Zoom calls where a lot of our learning took place by bouncing ideas off each other and building on ideas. And that kind of, because psychology is a very creative field and there's no right way to do therapy, it made for a really interesting experience where we got to be like, oh, I never would have thought to do it that way, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
Okay, that's interesting. And you said your master's program was basically better than the undergrad. So I want to talk about that. What was it like taking that master's program? And what advice would you give to someone that wants to advance their education and pursue a master's degree?
Yeah, I definitely it was definitely critical for myself because I knew I wanted to become a therapist. In order to become a therapist, it requires a minimum of masters. But definitely for me, it added a ton of foundational learning for various like theoretical orientations of cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, whereas an undergraduate degree often gives like a very much a broad overview in terms of various subjects. Like you have all the historical backgrounds of various studies that were done and whatnot, but they don't really ever teach you how do you do therapy, quote unquote, even though I said that there's no right way to do it, but like there's various protocols that we follow for various like orientations. So I think that was something that was pretty monumental for me to like learn through my master's. And yeah, to really just kind of build all that foundations and skills to become a therapist.
Okay. So we talk about your therapy practice. So what inspired you to become a psychotherapist?
Good question. It started off like I took my undergraduate degree, and for the first 2 years I was in biomedical sciences. Realized couldn't stand sciences. Um, didn't really want to be in a lab all day. So I ended up falling in love with psychology pretty early on and made the switch over. And around the same time, I actually started seeing my own psychologist, and I she's been so incredible. I still see her to this day, 8 years later, and she made such an impact on my life by providing me all those skills to kind of better myself, to focus on my self growth. So a part of me was just really turned inwards and said, like, hey, like this feels really good to be on this side of it. And could I be that for another person to even a small extent? So then, yeah, that's what kind of catapulted my journey to where I am now.
That's very interesting. Well, it's crazy because me and you actually have similar stories when it comes to that because I started out with a science degree. I was getting a bachelor's in biology because I wanted to be a physical therapist,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then took my first psychology class, and I was like, "Yeah, this is way more interesting." Studying
Yeah.
the human mind and everything. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that too. What were three valuable lessons that you've learned from the field of psychology that changed your perspective on life?
Oh, yeah. This is a big one. S- So can I say like as a therapist, what I've learned? Like there's three things like in that connection.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because like three big things that I think every person within like their master's degree and as they start to like graduate and become therapists is we don't save people. There's that misconception that like heroism aspect is we aren't there to save a client. We're there to help them make improvements within their own life so that they can then apply those improvements and grow from it. We're kind of pushing that autonomy back onto them, that power back to them. But I think that's a lot of times I had a hard time with that. If clients going home, they're like, oh no, I think I really need to say a little bit more, just to make sure it kind of gets in. But that was number one. Number two is it's always okay to say no. And a lot of therapists will struggle with this in terms of like boundary setting with bookings, like, oh, I'll just take on that extra client, even though they know they're at capacity. It could even go back to schooling too, like of just pushing yourself just a little too hard and not taking that time for self-care. Like we do burn out really quickly. So knowing where that limit lies is going to be big. And the other thing too is this is for anybody who's like recently going to be graduating, but being a part of a psychological team is incredible in terms of support and gaining resources for yourself. It's a lot of people come right out. I thought to come right out and I wanted to just, be on my own, do my own practice right away. And I was really glad that I got offered a position at a clinic that I just um and I started there and it's incredible. I wouldn't do it differently.
Okay. So you said you uh got out of your school and then you went to your therapist practice right away, immediately.
Yeah, I started to like my own private practice. I had like the website built, the whole like stuff. But then I ended up applying for a clinic as well because I was noticing I wasn't getting as many like traffic with clients. And then I joined the clinic and then I ended up being like, you know what, no, like I love being in this clinic and I just siphoned basically over right into my clinic full time.
Okay. So do you work with a practice right now as well as having your own practice?
Yeah. So what I do is I work with the Resiliency Clinic of Ottawa, and then um, so I do a lot of in-person work, but a lot of virtual as well. And then I have my private practice, but right now I kind of put that on pause and just pushed everything into the resiliency because everything seems really, really good right now.
Right. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask another question about the therapy practice specifically on a broader scale. Why do you think the practice of psychotherapy is important for us as a society right now?
That's a very, very good question. I think that it comes down to a lot of the climate within society too. And I was very fortunate I started my master's degree in 2020 and everything was very, as we all know, wild in terms of the atmosphere, right? So with my master's degree, because I mentioned the collaborative learning, a lot of what we were doing was how do we take the current climate and apply our psychological principles to it? Like what's working, what's not, like what orientations do we apply? What type of skills do we apply? How do we approach like the setting so it's not harmful or stigmatizing in any way? And so when we talk about why psychotherapy is very important, I think that right now there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of clients I see have this kind of sense of powerlessness, this weight of the world that they're carrying with them everywhere. So it's a space for them to just talk about it and to openly express their feelings regarding the world, express their feelings regarding various things in their lives, and then maybe gain some skills that they can take forward in this very like high anxiety society right now.
Right. So when you're having those uh, high anxiety sessions like that with another person,
Hmm.
what is that conversation like with them? How do you ease their nerves of like that first therapy session? They may not know what's going on or anything, and they like going through troubling life transitions. Like, how do you have that conversation with them?
Yeah, I think this really starts with the connection between the therapist and the client, right? And um, what we try to do is we try to disassemble that power dynamic because a lot of times, like, when you go to a physician's office or when you go to any sort of medical practitioner's office, there's a very clear power divide. But with a psychotherapy office, it's about a relationship that you're having with your client and your therapist that goes back and forth where you're sharing deep, intimate stuff about your life and you're being vulnerable and you're hoping that the person there isn't going to be judging or putting you down or trying to diagnose you with something, right? So that starts with meeting the client on their level, seeing them for the individual and uniqueness that they are, and then from there, what I like to do is really start off with like some very basic emotional regulation skills, breathing techniques, thermoregulation type thing, to really try to, okay, let's like ground ourselves here. Let's kind of take all that anxiety and put it where it needs to be for a bit. We can revisit it later, but right now, let's just kind of have this safe space for you. And then let's start opening up and talking about it.
Okay, so it's all about starting that foundation.
Exactly.
Kind of have that similar approach because I'm recently starting with like life coaching, and I
Oh,
kind of have like
nice.
a similar thing. Yeah, like I make content about it all the time. That's like that similar thing what I talk to other people about. Talking with like friends or family that come to me for some advice or anything. Like, let's figure out how you feel about this situation right now
Yeah.
and what we can do to help relieve the situation that you're going through. I think it's a really powerful way to um, approach problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like very much like a solution focused style of therapy, which is we apply that all the time too. It's you're right, it's very effective. Absolutely. Good for you.
And I also want to ask you more about that. Like, is that your philosophy? Like, what is your philosophy when it comes to therapy sessions?
Hmm, philosophy. Philosophy. Hmm. I think it's changed so much since I started, but what I currently adopt the most is that connection that I kind of mentioned of like, you know what, my job is to come in here and connect with an individual. And that can be enough for a lot of people. I've had clients who just want that connection. They don't want anybody giving them anything. They just want just somebody to talk to and understand and validate. And so I think that's my philosophy is that just by being present, by validating, by seeing the client for who they are and giving them the space, that's healing. And then everything I apply is going to aid in that healing, but that's the healing portion.
That's interesting. And you talked about how your philosophy has shifted over the years. So I do
Mhm.
want to ask, what was your first therapy session like compared to your most recent one? How has your practice shifted between the two of those?
It's so different. I remember coming when I first came out of grad school, I was like, okay, I have all these protocols now. So then, tried to maintain that like Freudian stoicism, right? Like not showing any emotion and then sitting down in the session, running like, okay, what we're going to do for the next little bit. And I'm going to introduce all these skills for you to do. And I was missing that connection. I was missing taking that time to really build that relationship. And I started, I started noticing that people weren't as receptive. They weren't receptive to what I was saying. They're checking out in sessions. Maybe there was just no showing or not showing up to other sessions. And things, I started altering like that boundary of what I thought was like where I needed to be in terms of like how I showed my emotions and where I actually could go. And as I started opening up more, I was getting this like this reinforcement from the client of they were actually opening up more too, and they were more receptive and less no-shows, less cancellations. Like, so I kind of built up to now where I'm like a fragment. I'll still use those protocols. Absolutely. Sometimes they are required, especially when we're talking about risk or maybe some more conditions like depression that require a little bit more standard check-ins. But it's a lot more fluid in my practice now, for sure.
And you go a little bit more into that fluidity by asking you a question like, can you share any memorable success stories that you've had from your practice? And what do you think were like the key factors that contributed to that success, that positive outcome?
Yeah. Actually, recently I had a case where we've been seeing each other for I think 3 months, and we just closed up the session because she'd felt that she had enough tools and resources she wanted to now apply to her. She thought she was in a really good place. And when I had first seen her, there was a lot of trauma that was in place to the point where a lot of who she was a lot these defense mechanisms and like hiding behind various masks. And so we worked together with it to like really did a lot of trauma work, unpacking it and revisiting it, processing it, but then also like a lot of guidance of like where she wanted to be and where she felt that she needed to be, and building up those skills, building up that self-confidence, changing how she talked about herself and her thoughts about herself. And then now, like, she's really grateful. She said that she really enjoyed therapy and she felt like it was really monumental in her life, and that she would reach out to me if there was ever another issue. But at this point, we're in a good place.
Well, that's
So
great.
yeah, it felt really good actually.
That was actually what I was just about to ask you next. How does it feel for you when you have those kind of successes with a client?
Incredible. It really feels purposeful and fulfilling, honestly, to me that like this is and reassuring, honestly. It's like I'm in a good place. This is where I need to be. Um, and it feels like, oh, like made the right decision in this career. I made that right decision of switching from biomed over to this degree for sure.
Okay, so it's like really reassuring, kind of enforcing, like, yeah, this is my purpose in life, and this is where I'm going.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I like that. Well, we can go back to school a little bit.
Mhm.
I'll say as a recent graduate, are there any innovative approaches that you have or that you bring to the field of counseling psychology that you probably haven't seen before? But this is like defined like, this is Jason Taylor's method of approaching therapy.
Interesting. So, okay. What something I always tell my clients actually in the first session is that I consider myself like a coach on a sports team, that I'm always going to be on somebody's side, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to push them towards their goal. And I think that kind of encompasses all of my therapy, where I often will like switch perspectives frequently within the session and trying to give them like alternate approaches to things while simultaneously helping them build up that skills, but through the entire time trying to maintain that unconditional positive regard and support for the client. So they feel pushed and they feel like, oh, I got homework. I got to do it before Jason next week. I see him, but they still feel them on their side.
Okay, that's all good to hear. I want to extend still going into the school perspective, because at Evolve here, we have a lot of psychology students, other students that are interested in psychology. They love learning about the mind and everything. But what would you say to a fresh college student? Like, what could they do to maximize their opportunity to pursue a route in therapy?
So they're just out of like their undergraduate degree or their master's degree? Sorry, just to specify.
We can say both, actually. Like, what's
Okay.
something they could do in their undergrad to like prepare them for that next step when they get there? Let's start
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, so like, um, in terms of like, let's start with undergrad. I know that the biggest thing with master's degree, because like to be a therapist, and well, I'm in Ontario, that is to be a therapist in Ontario, you need at least a master's degree. Um, so, and master's degree programs can be considerably competitive as well. So I think the starting point is like having those good grades as best as you can, and also having like 2 to 3 really good relationships with professors. It's hard, I know, I've tried, but trying the best you can to even just like build up so they know you a little bit better, so that helps the application process. That can be definitely big. Another thing too with that is understanding why you want to go into therapy is a big deal as well. Like I mentioned earlier, like that kind of feeling that I got from my therapist is a feeling that I kind of like to transfer to somebody else. Having something like that that drives you rather than just an idea of like finances can be extremely powerful to kind of get you into that next step. And when you're in a master's, I honestly recommend just plummeting like all of your focus and attention into it, of just really soaking up the material. I used to also look on like YouTube for various like mock sessions and like compare them for different like treatment types of like emotion focused therapy versus solution focused versus whatnot, and kind of just see like, oh, I really like what they did there versus I don't like what they did there, and that type of thing, and seeing where I felt comfortable and where I would start in the practice, which can obviously change as you go forward. But yeah, I think those are definitely, that would be probably my advice for that. And just learning whatever you can really is it's kind of immediate payback. Everything you like learn you can apply in psychology, which is fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And it's extremely helpful now, all these new resources, anything. Like you said, with YouTube, you can look up different kinds of therapy strategies and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with all that stuff we talked about of acquiring new kinds of information, I want to ask you, how do you stay updated on like latest research in mental health and practices in the field to enhance the quality of your service?
Absolutely. So one thing I do is, I don't know if you could tell already, I really love learning. So I often take, like I'm taking 3 courses right now, just extended learning on various like theoretical orientations, and certifications, that type of thing. Another thing we do as like therapists is try to, if that's a good thing, is the group supervision aspect from like if you're in a team, there's seeing other cases, how they would do something, researching and getting up to date on like why are they doing it that way versus this way, and like is this the appropriate way to do it, that type of thing. How do I do it and how do I adopt that into my practice is going to be really effective. And then also too, of just like understanding broad scale social issues and political issues, and then just being aware of those and how they're going to affect your practice, because they do, right? The person who walks in to see you can be touched by um, these factors in a variety of ways. So having an understanding of that and constantly running through kind of thoughts in our heads of like, oh, okay, like I need to be wary of this and understanding of this, so then I can apply this technique versus this technique, because maybe this one's a little less um, harming in a certain way.
Yeah, it's always important to learn as much as you can and apply
Absolutely.
that knowledge to how it would amplify your services specific. Because you can learn a
Absolutely.
bunch of information, but then like just copy and pasting somebody else's method is never really going to work.
Yeah,
Always
absolutely.
unique perspectives to everything.
Yeah.
Glad that's something that you emphasize. So another question about your time in school. As a recent graduate, what piece of advice would you give your younger self about to start a new semester?
Mm. This one, so oh, I know a big one is that I used to feel a lot of stress regarding financial pressure because school is expensive, right? And especially like when loans, start building and everything like that, and we focus on that. And a big thing I did, and maybe a lot of other people did, is when you try to work while taking school, you're really splitting your focus. It's not simply that, you're all in with school and the work you just do on the side, right? So I remember I was splitting my focus because I was so concerned on the financial strain it was going to eventually cause future me, that my grades or my attention was slipping a lot. And I felt like I didn't really learn as much as I'd like to have during my undergraduate degree, which is something I definitely changed with my master's. Like, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take this financial hit. I'm going to try to get as many loans as I can. And um, I did, and I just focused for the next 2 years on my master's. And I think that was it was very, very important for me anyway, that it allowed me to gain all this insight and not have to split that focus, not have to split that attention between it, or have I still had these worries of finances, obviously, right? And now here I am, like afterwards, being like, oh, okay. But I still felt like I made the right decision, really focusing my time on my education. Um, and I think it aided in a lot of my feelings of confidence and competence coming out of my master's degree, becoming a therapist.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So when it comes to like the learning new things, how important do you think is self-learning for undergrad? Because you mentioned that you didn't learn as much as you could have in undergrad. How important do you think self-learning is to that?
I think it's also super important. Absolutely. Um, like if maybe you missed a few classes, but then you took up your textbook and you taught yourself it, like that can be incredible. Like a lot of people, for the classes, they gain a lot of it, but right before the exams is where they're really like studying all that material. Now that's like often like kind of crash course, type stuff, right? And we all do it. But that kind of consistent learning throughout of like reading, studying that material, that you're right, is incredibly important. And actually, if we can try to learn that skill early on and practice it, it's going to be extremely important later on. Like where I'm at right now, where I'm taking courses, but I'm self-learning these courses, right? We don't have professors, we're just reading the material, digesting it type thing. And that's what's going to help you become a lifelong learner, because you might not necessarily have a professor who's telling you, oh, you got to learn this material for the next exam type thing, right? Absolutely, it's important.
So I want to get into some of those sources that you've used to self-learn. Do you have any favorite maybe psychologists that you've studied in the past that you've adopted some of your practice from?
Hmm. I Controversial opinion, I love Freud. Even though a lot of his ideas are kind of odd, I think there's just something vivacity about him, and like this kind of, it's just like it was just new ideas and he just threw it out there. But I think the one in which I identify the most with is more of like Carl Rogers, who had like brought forward that idea of that really importance, important connection with the client, that unconditional positive regard, the empathy, and just like the active listening component to them. I adopt a lot of that and I bring that forward with my practice.
Interesting. And have you read any books as well? Like, do you have any favorite psychology books or any books that you've read during your time in school?
In terms of like, I don't know if I have like a favorite per se. It depends. So like if we're talking like old school psychology books, um, like Man's Search for Meaning is a pretty good one by Viktor Frankl, but I'm more now newer style. I adopt the old ideas, but then I apply it to like current like self-help stuff on like how we can currently advance psychology. Like I don't know if you've read like the Atomic Habits for highly successful people.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've heard of
If
that
you
book.
read that, it's a
Yeah,
good book.
yeah.
Um, like where we're applying various theories of like CBT that came from the past, but then we're applying it to more like behavioral style practices here and now. So that's kind of where maybe I don't know if that answered your question correctly, but I like the ideas, but then I like the books from the present, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it did. I understand. Yeah, looking at the books from the past because they have great valuable insight, and you can still
Exactly.
turn that into your new ideas that you have right now. 'Cause
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're coming up on the last few minutes of the interview. So I want to ask this closing question that we'll ask everybody
Yeah.
as this very reflective question.
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, what kind of advice would you give like younger students starting school? Let's say they're just graduating high school and they don't really know what they want to do. What kind of advice would you give them to help them find that purpose? Help them find what they want to study, where they want to go in their lifetime.
I think this one's be gentle with yourself. And I think you and I can both agree with this one of like when we come out of high school, we think we want something that can quickly change, right? Like I changed my program, you changed your program. Um, I changed even like I took a gap year after my psychology degree. I was like, do I want to continue going on? I do, but I don't know if I would fit in it. So then I ended up working in men for a year, right? So life kind of takes you on these unexpected journeys. We can't really predict the future of where we're going to be. So all we can do is make the decisions that we're making right now that we think that's going to benefit us the most based off of what we know right now. And to be gentle on ourselves when that doesn't work out, because I don't know about you, but I was devastated after I realized that biomed was not for me. And I was like, I need to get out of here because I'm genuinely not enjoying this. Um, and I think if somebody had told me like that's okay, like just be gentle, like you'll find your way and you don't need to figure it out right now.
Right.
And we can try something else. And hey, maybe we lose some money, but hey, in the grand scheme of things, in the 80, 85 years that we're gonna live, it doesn't make that much of a difference, really. So just let's be gentle on ourselves.
Yeah. Very valuable, very important to understand to just
Mhm.
be easy because life, it doesn't all have to happen in one day. It's a process,
Exactly.
things change. It's an
And
adventure.
and high school is very much like a pressure cooker. Like it's a very like a microcosm of what actually society is. So once you get out there, it's so different too. And we think we have to like make all their decisions here and now, but we don't.
Well, I think today was a great interview with you, Jason. It was
Mm.
great meeting you.
Yeah, it was
Great.
nice meeting you too.
Yeah, it was great understanding more about therapy practice. You've definitely helped me understand more about psychology that I didn't know before. So
Oh, thank
great,
you.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
I
you for having
definitely,
me.
yeah, really appreciate your time. It'd be a pleasure to have you on again sometime, maybe in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Reach out anytime you'd like.
Do you want to any closing remarks or any last words? Where can people find you? Stuff like that.
Yeah, like if they're ever looking for any sort of help regarding, you can either reach me at jasontaylortherapy.com or directly going to the clinic that I work at, the Resiliency Clinic, which is resiliencyclinic.com, or just searching Resiliency Clinic Ottawa on Google. Yeah, or if you want to reach me on my socials, like my Instagram is Jason Taylor Therapy. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Jason. All right. I hope you have
Thanks.
a great day.
Thank you so much.